Government students, I wanted to take a couple minutes to go over the short answer questions for your Principals Unit exam, since you seem to have struggled with them. And as you know by now, in order to pass these unit exams in government, you're going to need to answer and respond to those short answer questions and do well on them, since they are worth such a big chunk of your grade. So there's 3 short answer questions on this exam. First one has to do with the amendments, the Bill of Rights. So there's no really wrong or right answer to that short answer question. You just need to show an understanding of the 3 amendments that you choose. The next 2 short answer questions has to do with formal and informal amendments, which I'm going to talk about right now. So formal amendments, this is when a section of text is actually added to the Constitution to kind of revise it or to make a brand new rule. It actually is written down in the Constitution. That's a formal amendment, and there's different ways to get formal amendments. You can get them through proposing by the houses, House of Representatives and Senate, or a convention, and then ordering for them to be ratified. 3/4 of state legislatures have to pass, or 3/4 of conventions has to pass. So that was the formal amendments. Informal amendments, just the opposite. They don't actually change the wording of the Constitution. They just kind of change how the government is run. So it's informal because nothing is formally changed on the Constitution. And there's 5 specific sources, and in your short answer, you just need to choose 3 of these. First one is judicial interpretation, and this just This just refers to how the Supreme Court or judges interpret the Constitution or the actions of the government, whether or not they're constitutional. So that's one. Another one, it would be a legislation source for an informal amendment. So Congress can obviously pass laws that kind of clarify how the government works. Another one is executive changes, and that's when the president kind of interprets what the Constitution says about their power, and depending on who's in control, who's in power as president, they might interpret the Constitution a little different. Or depending on what's going on in the country, if we're in the middle of a war, they might interpret their war powers differently. 4th source of informal amendments is customs, and these are just kind of the various practices of how the government gets things done but aren't necessarily written in the Constitution. And then lastly is party practices. The Constitution doesn't actually, and this isn't like party, this is like political parties, the Constitution doesn't actually list anything or discuss anything about political parties, about Democratic parties, about Republican parties. However, party practices, political parties greatly influence, kind of how government gets stuff done and how Congress works. So that's informal and formal amendments. So just a reminder, short answer questions are 45% of your grade on this one. So let's look at those short answer questions. First one has to do with informal and formal amendments. So you just have to explain the concept of each. So give a definition and then provide at least 3 sources for where we get those informal amendments. And I just told you about 5 of them. And then your second short answer question that has to do with amendments asks you to talk about formal amendments, how they're proposed and ratified. So how do we get formal amendments? So let's look at both of these questions. So for informal amendments, as we talked about, this is just making changes to the Constitution without actually adding or changing the Constitution itself. And we talked about those 5 different sources, so you just need to pick 3 of those and kind of explain what they are. And then obviously, formal amendments is when a section of text is actually added to the end of the Constitution to change it. And so then your other short answer question asks you to talk about the 4 methods of getting formal amendments. So method 1 is Congress can propose it, and then state legislatures have to ratify. Second method would be Congress proposes, again, but state conventions ratify. Third method is when national conventions propose and state conventions ratify. And then the 4th method is when there's a national convention that proposes it and then the state conventions ratify. So hopefully this clarifies those short answer questions. And so after viewing this, go ahead and shoot me a K-mail. Say, Mrs. Vasquez, I'm ready to ace my Principals Unit exam, and I will reset it for you. So I'm looking forward to seeing you find success this second time on your unit exam. If you need help, let me know. Thanks.